The valet almost dropped the keys when he saw what pulled up. Not because the car was expensive, though it was, a matte black Escalade with chrome that caught the Atlanta sun like it was showing off on purpose. But because of what came out of it. 4 car seats. 4. Lined up in the back like a row of dominoes, and out of each one, a small brown face blinking against the light. Simone Whitfield stood on the curb in a cream dress that fit like it had been sewn onto her that morning, adjusting the strap of a diaper bag on her shoulder, while her husband unbuckled the twins on the left side and she took the 2 on the right. 4 babies. 11 months old, matching. "Y'all ready to go embarrass somebody?" Andre asked her, not quite under his breath, and Simone laughed the kind of laugh that had teeth in it. "Baby, I didn't come here to embarrass anybody," she said, hoisting one of the girls onto her hip. "I came here for cake." 20 minutes earlier, 3 miles away, Marcus Rain had been standing in front of a mirror in a guest bathroom at his mother's house, straightening a bow tie he did not need for a baby shower, practicing a face he'd been rehearsing for 6 weeks. The face of a man who had won. The face he wanted Simone to see the second she walked through that door. He didn't know about the Escalade yet. He didn't know about the 4 car seats. He had spent 6 weeks planning this party around a single moment, and that moment was about to walk in, wearing cream and holding a baby that wasn't supposed to exist. Let's back up, because you need to understand exactly how ugly a man's heart has to get before he invites his ex-wife to a baby shower just to watch her suffer through it. Marcus and Simone had been married for 6 years. Good years, mostly, in the beginning. The kind of young black love that gets photographed at family reunions and held up as an example. He was an assistant regional manager climbing toward a district office. She ran a boutique event planning business out of a converted garage that eventually became a real storefront on Cascade Road. They had a townhouse in East Point, 2 car notes, and, for 4 of those 6 years, a very quiet, very private war being fought over a baby that would not come. They tried. God, they tried. Ovulation trackers on the nightstand, positions recommended by a fertility app, prayer circles at First Baptist that Simone's mother organized without asking permission. Nothing. 2 miscarriages, the second one at 11 weeks, the kind that takes something out of a woman that doesn't ever fully grow back. And somewhere in year 4, Marcus stopped saying we and started saying you. You need to go get checked again. You think it's stress. Maybe you need to relax more. My mama had 4 kids, no problem. This ain't coming from my side. He never went to get himself checked, not once. Simone asked him, begged him, honestly, sitting across from him at their kitchen table with a pamphlet from the fertility clinic in her hand. And he waved it off like she'd suggested something insulting. "Ain't nothing wrong with me," he'd said. "I'm a man." By year 5, he had a name for it that he thought was cute, that he said in front of his boys at the barber shop, like it was a joke. "My wife can't have kids." By year 6, he'd started saying something worse, quieter, meaner, usually after a couple of Hennessy's. Barren. Like she was land that wouldn't grow anything. Like it was a diagnosis instead of a cruelty. The divorce took 4 months. He didn't fight her on the townhouse. He didn't fight her on much of anything, honestly, because by that point he had already met Deja Marsh at a company conference in Charlotte, and Deja was 26, and Deja laughed at his jokes like they were the funniest thing she'd ever heard, and Deja got pregnant 9 months after the ink dried on the divorce papers. Marcus told everybody who'd listened that it was proof, that it had never been him, that the problem had walked out the door in a U-Haul, and he was finally getting what a real family was supposed to look like. What he didn't know, what nobody but Simone and one very discreet doctor in Buckhead knew, was that 8 months after her divorce was final, Simone had gone in for one more round of testing, mostly to close a door in her own head so she could move forward. And the doctor had looked at her chart and looked at her and said the sentence that changed everything. Miss Carter. There's nothing here that would prevent you from conceiving. Nothing at all. She'd sat in the parking garage of that medical building for 45 minutes before she could drive home. Andre Whitfield came into her life the slow way, not the movie way. He fixed HVAC systems for a living, owned his own small company with 4 trucks and his name on the side of them, and he met Simone when her studio's air conditioning died in the middle of an August heat wave 3 weeks before a client's wedding. He showed up in coveralls, fixed the unit in 90 minutes, and then sat outside on the curb with her afterward, both of them sweating, sharing a bag of chips from the gas station, because neither one wanted to go back inside just yet. They didn't rush. They dated for a year and a half before he asked her to marry him, and even then he did it plain. No flash mob, no drone footage, just down on one knee in her kitchen on a Tuesday because he said he didn't want to wait for a special occasion to ask her something he already knew the answer to. 11 months after the wedding, Simone found out she was pregnant. Then, at the 12-week ultrasound, the doctor got very quiet and turned the monitor toward her and said, "I need you to look at this." 4 heartbeats. Simone had cried so hard in that exam room that the tech had to leave and come back with tissues twice. She carried them to 34 weeks, which the specialist called nothing short of remarkable for quadruplets, and delivered 4 healthy babies by scheduled C-section on a Thursday morning in October. 2 girls, 2 boys, a full house, a full name for each of them, picked out months in advance because Andre had insisted they be ready regardless of how many showed up. Nadia, Noel, Xavier, Malik, Marcus did not know any of this. Marcus had not spoken to Simone in over 2 years, not since the day she'd mailed back the last box of his mother's dishes with a note that said only, "Take care of yourself." He'd blocked her on everything. He didn't follow her, didn't check on her, didn't want to know. So when his mother, Yvonne Rain, sat him down in March and told him she wanted to invite Simone to the baby shower, Marcus laughed in her face. "Mama, for what?" "Because that girl was in this family for 6 years, and she never did one thing wrong to me, and I'm not about to disrespect her just because you decided to be a fool," Yvonne said, not even looking up from the pot she was stirring. "She's coming," Marcus argued for 3 days. And then, somewhere on the 4th day, standing in his bathroom shaving, a different thought crept in. One uglier than the argument he'd been having with his mother, a thought that curled up in his chest and made him smile at himself in the mirror. Let her come. Let Simone Carter, no, Simone Whitfield now, but he refused to think of her by that name, walk into a room full of his family and his fiancé's family and see him, glowing, a father finally, a real man finally, everything she had failed to give him, laid out on a dessert table in the shape of a diaper cake. He wanted her to sit in that room and watch Deja's stomach and know, in front of everybody, exactly whose fault it had all been. And he didn't tell his mother that part. He just said, "Fine, invite her." And he smiled the whole rest of the week. If you've been with us before, you already know how this channel works. We don't do fairy tales. We do the truth, messy and real, the way families actually fall apart and put themselves back together. If this is your first time pulling up, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because Turn Up Tales drops stories like this every single week. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when those 4 little voices walk through that door. All right, back to the party. Yvonne Rain's house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Stone Mountain, the kind of house with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for a bounce house, and on the Saturday of the shower it was decorated within an inch of its life. Sage green and gold balloons arched over the front door. A banner read, "Welcome Baby Rain" in cursive gold lettering. Inside, 40 folding chairs faced a small stage area where Deja would sit to open gifts, flanked by 2 enormous bouquets of eucalyptus and white roses. Marcus stood near the drink table in a crisp white button-down, greeting cousins and co-workers, glancing at the front door every 90 seconds like a man checking a clock he was afraid was broken. Deja floated through the room in a fitted sage dress that showed off the curve of her 8 months belly, laughing, glowing exactly the way a woman is supposed to glow at her own baby shower, completely unaware that her fiancé had spent the last 2 weeks orchestrating a piece of theater with her pregnancy as the set. At 2:47 p.m., the front door opened, and the room did the thing rooms do when they sense a shift before they understand why. Conversations dipped, a few heads turned, and Marcus's whole body went rigid with anticipation, a smile already climbing onto his face. Simone stepped through the doorway first, then Andre, holding 2 of the babies. Then Simone's older cousin Renee, holding the other 2. For 1 full second, the room was silent enough to hear the air conditioning kick on. Marcus's smile did not fall immediately. It froze, stretched too wide, stuck in place, the way a smile gets when the brain behind it hasn't yet caught up to what the eyes are seeing. He counted without meaning to. 1 baby, 2, 3, 4. "Hey, Miss Yvonne," Simone said warmly, crossing the room first to Marcus's mother, kissing her on the cheek like she'd done 100 times over 6 years of holidays. "Thank you for inviting us. This all looks beautiful." "Look at you," Yvonne said, and her voice cracked in a way that made it clear she already knew, had probably known for months, had maybe even been the one who quietly kept up with Simone on social media, even after her son deleted every trace of her. "Look at these babies." Oh my lord, look at these babies. Marcus had not moved from his spot by the drink table. His mouth had gone dry. Somewhere in the back of the room, his cousin Tavon leaned over to his wife and whispered something, and his wife's hand flew up to cover her mouth. Deja, seated on her small decorated throne of a chair at the front of the room, craned her neck to see what all the commotion was, one hand instinctively resting on top of her belly. "Marcus?" she called out, smiling, still not understanding. "Baby, who is that?" Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Simone turned, finally, and looked at him directly for the first time in over 2 years. She did not look angry. She did not look triumphant, not yet. That would come later, in smaller doses, throughout the afternoon, in ways far more devastating than a scene. Right now she just looked calm, and a little amused, the way a person looks when they've been carrying a secret so heavy for so long that setting it down finally feels like nothing at all. "Hi, Marcus," she said, and shifted the baby on her hip. Nadia, in a little gold headband, gnawing contentedly on her own fist. "This is Nadia. That's Noelle over there with my cousin. And these 2 big men Andre's got are Xavier and Malik." She let that sit in the room for exactly as long as it needed to sit. "Say hi, y'all," she added, gently to the babies, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Say hi to everybody." And on cue, because babies at 11 months are unpredictable creatures who occasionally choose the worst possible moment to be perfect, Xavier, held against Andre's chest, lifted one small hand and waved it, and let out a delighted, garbled sound that landed somewhere between a laugh and a word. The room did not know whether to gasp or applaud. A few people did both. Marcus's face had gone the color of ash. "You had," he started, and his voice cracked on the second word, high and thin, nothing like the voice he used at the barber shop when he told people his wife couldn't have kids. "You had 4 kids?" "I did," Simone said simply. "Quadruplets. 11 months old." "How?" He stopped himself. He knew how. Everybody in that room who'd ever taken a single biology class knew how. What he meant, what was actually crawling up his throat and threatening to strangle him in front of 40 guests and his pregnant fiancée, was a different question entirely, one he did not have the courage to ask out loud in front of his mother. If it wasn't her, if it was never her, then who exactly had it been? Across the room, Deja's smile had drained away completely. She was still seated, one hand pressed flat against the top of her belly, watching her fiancé's face do something she had never seen it do before. Watching the man who told her, 3 separate times during their courtship, that his ex-wife simply couldn't have kids, it wasn't in the cards for her, stand frozen and gray in front of the visual, undeniable proof that the cards had been just fine. "Marcus," Deja said again, quieter this time, and there was something new underneath the word. Not confusion anymore. The beginning of understanding. Simone had not raised her voice once. She hadn't needed to. She simply stood there in the doorway of the house she used to spend every Thanksgiving in, holding a baby that shouldn't have been possible according to everything Marcus Rain had told the world for 2 years, and let the silence do what silence does best in a room full of people who all suddenly had the exact same question. Yvonne Rain, to her credit, was the first to move. She reached out and took Nadia gently from Simone's arms, cradling the baby against her chest, like she'd been waiting her whole life for the chance. "Come on in, baby," she said to Simone, loud enough for the whole room, deliberately, pointedly loud. "Come sit down. Let me hold my grandbabies." The word landed in the room like a dropped plate. Grandbabies. Marcus flinched like he'd been struck. "Mama," he said, low, urgent, stepping toward her. "Mama, those ain't. She's not with me no more, those ain't." "Boy," Yvonne said, not even looking at him, bouncing Nadia gently on her hip. "I have known this girl for 6 years, and she has never once lied to my face. I cannot say the same for you." She turned to Simone with a soft, sad smile. "Sit down, baby. Please get you a plate." And that was only the first 4 minutes. Simone found a seat near the back with Andre and the babies, close enough to the action that she could see everything. Far enough that she wasn't sitting directly in the center of the storm she'd just walked into. Renee took the seat beside her, and Andre balanced Malik on his knee, murmuring something to keep the baby entertained, while 38 sets of adult eyes kept sliding sideways toward them every few seconds. Deja had not said another word out loud. She sat frozen on her little decorated chair, one hand still resting on her belly, staring at the space where Marcus stood, and something in her face had gone from confused to calculating. The particular look of a woman doing very fast math. Marcus crossed the room to her, dropping his voice, but not quite low enough. "Baby, let me explain." "Explain what?" Deja said, and her voice, when it finally came, was flat and cold in a way it had never been before. Not once in the 18 months Marcus had known her. "Explain how your ex-wife who couldn't have kids is sitting in your mama's living room with 4 kids. I don't know how she—" "Don't." Deja held up a hand, cutting him off, and it trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "Don't you dare stand here and lie to me at my own baby shower." Behind them, near the dessert table, Marcus's cousin Tavon had already pulled out his phone, angling it just slightly, not recording exactly, but ready to, the way people at family functions are always ready to when the temperature in a room starts climbing. Yvonne carried Nadia back over to Simone's side of the room and settled into the empty chair next to her, still holding the baby, running a thumb gently over the small gold headband like she was trying to memorize the texture of it. "How long you been keeping this from him?" Yvonne asked quietly, not unkindly, just tired, the way a mother gets tired of cleaning up messes her grown son keeps making. "I wasn't keeping anything from him, Miss Yvonne," Simone said. "He didn't want to know anything about my life after the divorce. Blocked me everywhere. I didn't owe him an update." "No," Yvonne agreed. "No, you didn't." Across the room, the argument between Marcus and Deja had dropped to a furious whisper that was somehow louder than shouting, the kind of hiss that carries across a quiet room better than a scream would. "You told my mother he can't have kids," Deja was saying. "You told my sister. You told everybody at your job, Marcus. I heard you say it on the phone to your boy Rashad. I said what I believed. You believed a lie because it made you feel better." Deja's voice cracked and rose despite herself, and half the room stopped pretending not to listen. "You let me think I was some kind of miracle. You let your mama throw me a whole party thinking I did something she couldn't do, and now there's 4 babies sitting in your mama's living room saying otherwise. Deja, keep your voice down. Don't tell me to keep my voice down at my own baby shower." Simone, from her seat near the back, did not say a word. She didn't need to. She sat with Malik now settled against her own chest, rocking gently, watching the scene unfold with an expression that Andre would later describe, privately, as the calmest he had ever seen his wife look in a room full of chaos. "You good?" he murmured to her. "I'm great, baby," Simone said, and meant it. Across the room, Marcus's eyes found hers again, over his mother's shoulder, over the top of his furious fiancé's head, and for just a second, 1 second, Simone saw something in his face she hadn't seen since the early years of their marriage, before the meanness set in, before the word Barren ever left his mouth. She saw fear, because if it hadn't been her, all those years, if 4 healthy babies had come out of her body in a single afternoon 11 months ago, then somewhere, in whatever conversation was about to happen between him and Deja once this room finally emptied out, Marcus Rain was going to have to reckon with a question he had spent 6 years running from, a question with an answer he was terrified, genuinely, visibly terrified, to hear out loud. And Simone Whitfield, holding another woman's, no, holding her own son against her chest, in the house that used to be her second home, watched him realize it in real time, and felt nothing that resembled the vengeance she might have imagined feeling, years ago, in her lowest moments. She just felt like a woman at a party, waiting for cake. Back near the dessert table, two of Marcus's co-workers had drifted close enough to Renee to strike up conversation, the way strangers at parties do when they're hungry for information and too polite to ask for it directly. "So how do you know the family?" One of them, a woman named Priscilla from his district office, asked, eyes flicking towards Simone with badly disguised curiosity. "Simone's my cousin," Renee said, not unfriendly, but with the flat delivery of someone who had clocked exactly what was being fished for. "We grew up together." "And she was married to Marcus before Deja?" "For 6 years," Renee confirmed. "Wow." Priscilla glanced again at the row of car seats parked near the wall, where Andre was setting up a small blanket for the twins to lie on. Marcus always talked about his ex like she'd been through it, you know? Real sad situation. He never mentioned a lot of things, apparently," Renee said, and picked up a deviled egg off the tray, effectively ending the conversation with the particular grace Southern women deploy when they've decided a topic is closed. Priscilla took the hint and drifted off toward the drink table, whispering something to the co-worker beside her the second she was 3 steps away, and Renee rolled her eyes at Simone from across the room, a silent little exchange that made Simone smile despite everything. "They're going to be talking about this at the office Monday," Renee murmured once she'd made her way back over. "Let them talk," Simone said, adjusting Nadia's headband where it had slipped sideways. "I didn't come here to control anybody's gossip. I came here because Miss Yvonne asked me to, and because I wasn't about to let 2 years of a man's lies keep me hiding my own children from people who love them." "Look at you," Renee said, shaking her head with something like admiration. "Girl, 2 years ago you would have cried in the bathroom before you ever walked through that door." 2 years ago I didn't have 4 reasons to hold my head up," Simone said simply, and looked down at Nadia, who had grabbed a fistful of her mother's dress and was chewing on the fabric with great concentration, utterly unbothered by the social earthquake happening around her. The real unraveling hadn't even started yet. Nobody brought out the diaper cake for another 20 minutes, and by then it didn't matter, because nobody in that living room was thinking about diapers anymore. They were thinking about arithmetic. 6 years of marriage, 2 years of divorce, 4 babies born 11 months ago to a woman who had, according to Marcus Rain's version of events told at barbershops and family cookouts across 3 counties, been physically incapable of conceiving. Deja had gone quiet in a way that unsettled people more than her shouting had. She sat very still in her decorated chair, hands folded over her belly, staring at a spot on the carpet, while Marcus hovered beside her, like a man standing next to a bomb he wasn't sure was still ticking or had already gone off. "Say something," he muttered to her. "I don't have anything to say to you right now," Deja said, not looking up. Yvonne clapped her hands together, once, sharp, the universal sound of a Southern mother deciding a room needed redirecting. All right, everybody, let's eat before the food gets cold. Deja, baby, you want your plate first?" The party limped forward, the way parties do when everyone in the room is performing normalcy, for the sake of somebody's grandmother in the corner. People filled paper plates with pulled pork and mac and cheese and potato salad, made small, careful conversation about the weather and the Falcons, and anything that wasn't sitting 11 feet away in a cream dress holding a baby, with Simone's exact same dimple in his left cheek. Simone, for her part, made no move to leave, and no move to make a scene either. She fed Malik a bottle, let Xavier gum on a teething ring, laughed softly with Renee about something on her phone, and generally behaved like a woman who had simply come to a party, which was in fact true. She hadn't orchestrated any of this. She hadn't planned a single second of it. She had gotten a text from Yvonne 3 weeks earlier. "Sweetheart, I know it might be strange, but I'd love for you and your family to come to the baby shower. No pressure at all." And she had talked it over with Andre for 2 nights before deciding that showing up, plainly, honestly, with her whole beautiful, loud family, was its own kind of answer to 2 years of being called Barren behind her back. She hadn't lied about anything. She simply hadn't corrected 2 years of assumptions that were never hers to correct. Marcus found his way to her side of the room, around 3:20, after 3 attempts to sit next to Deja were met with her getting up and walking to the kitchen each time. He crouched near Simone's chair, keeping his voice low, his eyes darting between her face and the baby in her arms like he couldn't quite settle on which was harder to look at. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Outside, just for a minute." Simone glanced at Andre, who gave the smallest shrug, "Your call," and handed Malik over to Renee. "5 minutes," Simone said. The backyard was quieter, decorated with the same sage and gold as the inside, string lights not yet turned on because the sun hadn't set. Marcus led her past a table of unwrapped gifts, to the far corner near the fence, out of earshot of the kitchen window. "How," he said, and stopped and tried again. "How is this possible, Simone? You need to tell me the truth right now. Are those—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. He looked physically ill. "Are they what, Marcus?" Simone said, and her voice had an edge to it now that hadn't been there inside, a controlled sharpness she'd been saving. "Say it. Ask me what you're really asking me. Whose are they?" "They're mine and my husband's," Simone said flatly. "Andre's. All 4 of them. Nadia, Noel, Xavier, and Malik Whitfield. Born last October, 34 weeks, by C-section. 2 years and 4 months after our divorce was final." "That's not—" He shook his head like a man trying to clear water out of his ears. "That timeline don't work. We were only divorced for 2 years and 4 months, Marcus. I did the math too, believe me. I had a lot of time to sit with it." He was quiet for a second, jaw working. "You're telling me the doctors were wrong. All those years, all those tests. You're telling me it just fixed itself?" Simone almost laughed, except there was nothing funny about it, not really. "No, Marcus, I'm telling you nothing was ever broken. 8 months after the divorce, I went back for one more round of testing, just for me, just to close it out in my own head. And the doctor sat me down and told me there was nothing, in my chart that would prevent me from conceiving. Nothing at all. That's not possible. We tried for 4 years. "We tried for 4 years, Simone repeated, and now her voice did rise. Just slightly. Just enough. We. You said we like. It was a team effort, Marcus, but you never once went and got yourself checked. Not one time. I asked you. I put a pamphlet in your hand at our kitchen table, and you looked at me like I'd slapped you. Because ain't nothing wrong with me. You don't know that." The words came out sharper than she meant, sharper than she'd planned for this conversation to get. But 4 years of biting her tongue has a way of coming out eventually, at the worst and most necessary times. "You never checked, Marcus. You made a decision about whose fault it was without a single piece of evidence, and then you told the whole world. You called me Barren in front of your friends. You said it to my face in our own bedroom, more than once, like it was just a fact you were stating about the weather." Marcus's face had gone tight. "I was hurting too, Simone. You don't think that broke something in me too? Watching you cry every month, watching us lose those babies." "Don't," Simone said, and her voice cracked for the first time, the only crack that would show all afternoon. "Don't you dare bring up those babies to justify what you did to me. I buried a piece of myself twice in that marriage, and instead of holding me through it, you turned around and made me the villain of my own grief." Silence settled between them, thick and unpleasant, broken only by the muffled sound of the party continuing inside. Someone's laugh too loud and too forced through the kitchen window. "So what now?" Marcus finally said, quieter. "You just gonna let everybody in there think what they're thinking?" "What are they thinking, Marcus?" He didn't answer. "I didn't lie to a single person in that house today," Simone said. "I told your mother thank you for the invitation. I introduced my children by their names. If people in there are doing math and not liking the answer, that's not a lie I told. That's a truth you've been running from for 2 years, finally catching up to you at your own party." Inside, Deja had made her way to the small bathroom off the hallway and locked the door, sitting on the closed lid of the toilet, with both hands braced on her belly, breathing slowly through her nose, the way her doula had taught her for early labor. Except what she was managing right now wasn't labor. It was something closer to grief, arriving early, uninvited, at the worst possible moment. She thought back over 18 months of a relationship built, she was realizing now, on a foundation she'd never actually verified. Marcus had told her about Simone within the first month of dating. Carefully, sadly, a man clearly still working through pain, he'd made it sound like. My ex-wife, she couldn't have kids, it just wasn't in the cards for her. Doctors couldn't find anything wrong, but it never happened, and it broke us both down over the years. Deja had felt for him. Had felt, honestly, a little special, a little chosen, when she got pregnant 4 months into their relationship. Like she was the answer to a question the universe had been asking Marcus for years. Now she sat in a stranger's bathroom 8 months pregnant, doing the same math everybody else in that living room was doing, and arriving at the same uncomfortable place. If Simone could have 4 babies at once 11 months ago, then it had never been Simone. Which meant, somewhere in the 18 months Deja had known him, Marcus Rain had let her believe a story about his own body that he had never once actually confirmed. Worse, he had let it become the emotional center of their entire courtship. He'd used another woman's supposed brokenness as the backdrop against which his new relationship got to look like a miracle. There was a knock at the door. "Dej, you okay in there?" It was her sister Camille's voice. Deja unlocked the door and let her in, and the second the door clicked shut behind her sister, she started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and steady, the kind of crying that comes from realizing you've been standing on ground that was never actually solid. "He never got tested," Deja said. "Camille, he never got tested, not once, and he let me believe. He let everybody believe." "I know, baby, I know." Camille pulled her into a hug, careful of the belly between them. "You want to leave? We can leave right now. I'll pull the car around." "No?" Deja wiped her face, sat up straighter. "No, I'm not hiding in a bathroom at my own baby shower. Fix my makeup. I'm going back out there." By the time Simone and Marcus came back inside from the yard, the mood in the house had shifted into something brittle and careful. The particular hush of a room full of people pretending they hadn't spent the last 30 minutes speculating in low voices about exactly what was happening outside. Yvonne intercepted her son at the sliding door, pulling him aside with a grip on his elbow that brooked no argument. "You knew," she said, low, furious, in the specific way only a mother can be furious with a grown son. "Marcus Rain, look at me. You never once had yourself checked? Mama, don't start. 4 years, Yvonne said. 4 years that girl cried in my kitchen. 4 years I watched her fold herself smaller and smaller trying to be enough for you. And you never once thought to check if the problem might have been sitting on your own side of the bed? It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple," Yvonne said. "I raised you better than this. I raised you to be a man who takes responsibility, not one who hands his shame to the nearest woman and calls it her fault." She glanced past him, toward the kitchen doorway where Deja now stood, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, chin lifted, clearly having decided to face the room rather than hide from it. "And now look what you've built on top of that lie." Marcus had no answer for his mother. He never had, not really. Not since he was a boy getting caught in something and finding out that Yvonne Rain's disappointment landed heavier than any belt ever could. Deja walked back into the main room to a scattering of soft, uncertain applause, the kind people offer when they don't know what else to do with their hands, and reclaimed her seat at the front, back straight, one hand resting protectively over her belly. "I want to open my gifts," she announced, to the room, her voice only wobbling slightly. Can we do that? I would like to open my gifts." It was, everyone would later agree, one of the bravest things they'd ever watched a woman do. Sit in a chair at the center of a room, smiling and tearing wrapping paper off onesies and diaper bags and a rocking chair from her mother, while the man who put her in that position stood 11 feet away next to his ex-wife's 4 babies, unable to look directly at either woman for more than a few seconds at a time. Simone did not gloat. She sat back down beside Andre, took Malik back into her arms, and quietly, deliberately, participated in the party the way any guest would, clapping when Deja opened a particularly cute gift, murmuring appropriate oohs at a diaper cake shaped like an elephant. She had not come to destroy anybody's baby shower. She had simply come honestly as herself, and let 2 years of a man's careless lies finally run out of road on their own. If you're catching the tension building right now, and trust me, we are only halfway through what happens at this party, make sure you're subscribed to Turn Up Tales, because this next part is where things really start coming apart, and you do not want to scroll past it. All right, let's get back into it. The gift opening lasted 45 minutes, stretched thin by an undercurrent nobody could quite shake. Somewhere around the rocking chair, Marcus's cousin Tavin, never a man known for tact, always the one at family functions who said the thing everybody else was thinking and immediately regretted, leaned toward Marcus with a can of Sprite in his hand and a grin that had no business existing in that room. "So real talk, cuz?" Tavon said, not quite quietly enough. "You gotta go get checked now, right? Like, for real, for real?" The room's ambient noise dipped again. Deja's hands froze mid-unwrap on a package of burp cloths. "Tavon," Marcus said through his teeth. "Not now. I'm just saying," Tavon pressed. Oblivious or unbothered, hard to say which. 4 kids, bro. At once. That's a whole answer right there. That's not even a question no more. Tavon, I swear to God, I'm just saying what everybody's thinking. Everybody wasn't asking you to say it out loud, Yvonne snapped from across the room. And Tavon, finally reading the temperature correctly, raised both hands and shut his mouth, muttering an apology into his soda can. But the sentence had already landed, sitting there in the middle of the party like a dropped plate. Nobody wanted to be the one to clean up. Deja set down the burp cloths. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, in front of everyone, and asked the question plainly, without a hint of theater, in a voice gone very quiet and very tired. "Are you going to get tested, Marcus?" He looked at her. He looked at his mother. He looked, finally, briefly, at Simone sitting 11 feet away with her son on her hip, watching him with an expression that held no cruelty in it at all, which somehow made it worse than if it had. "I don't know," Marcus said, and it was the most honest sentence he'd spoken all afternoon. Deja nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer and was disappointed anyway, and went back to opening a gift, her hands moving mechanically now, all the earlier brightness drained out of the motion. Nobody clapped for that one. By the time the gifts were finally cleared away and people started drifting toward the door with their leftover plates wrapped in foil, the party had settled into a strange, hushed version of itself. The decorations still up, the balloons still bobbing cheerfully against the ceiling, completely at odds with the mood of everyone standing beneath them. Marcus's co-workers left in a tight cluster, murmuring to each other the second they hit the porch steps. His cousin Tavon lingered by the door, clearly wanting to say something else, clearly being physically restrained by his wife's hand on his arm. "I really am sorry, cuz," Tavon offered, on his way out, catching Marcus near the entryway. "I wasn't trying to put you on blast like that." "You did, though," Marcus said, without much heat left in him to argue. "But you weren't wrong to ask it. Everybody in that room was thinking it. You just said it out loud." "For what it's worth," Tavon added, quieter now, "I always liked Simone. Never made sense to me, the way you used to talk about her at the shop. She was always good to this family." Marcus didn't answer that, just nodded once, tightly, and watched his cousin disappear down the porch steps. Inside, Deja had moved to the kitchen, ostensibly to help Yvonne wrap the leftover food, though mostly she just stood at the counter with a roll of foil in her hands, not actually using it, staring at the pattern on the countertop like it might offer her some kind of instruction on how to feel. "You want to talk about it?" Yvonne asked gently, sliding a tray of mac and cheese into a storage container beside her. "I don't even know what there is to say," Deja admitted. "I keep running the timeline in my head. 4 months into dating, he told me about her, told me she couldn't have kids, told me the doctors never found anything wrong, but it just never happened for them. I believed him. Why wouldn't I believe him? He said it so sad, Miss Yvonne, like it broke something in him." "It probably did break something in him," Yvonne said, "just not the something he told you it broke." Deja set down the foil. "Do you think he knew, this whole time? Do you think he suspected it might have been him and just never wanted to find out?" Yvonne considered the question carefully before answering, the way she considered most things involving her son these days, with the weary honesty of a mother who loved him completely and had also, somewhere along the way, stopped making excuses for him. "I think my son has spent his whole life being scared of being wrong about anything. His daddy was the same way. God rest him. Some men would rather live inside a comfortable lie than sit with an uncomfortable truth for 5 minutes. She reached over and squeezed Deja's hand. "I don't think he set out to hurt Simone on purpose, baby, but I do think he chose not to know something for 4 years, because knowing would have cost him something he wasn't ready to pay. And now, I'm the one sitting here 8 months pregnant, doing the math for him, Deja said, and her voice wavered. I know, Yvonne said softly, and I am so sorry it landed on you this way. At your own party, in front of all these people. You deserved better than this today. You deserve better than this. Period. Deja wiped at her eyes with the back of her wrist, careful not to smudge what was left of her makeup. I love him, Miss Yvonne. That's the part that makes this so hard. I love him, and I'm furious with him, and I'm carrying his child, and I don't know how to hold all three of those things at the same time. You don't have to figure that out today, Yvonne said. Today, you just have to get through today. The rest of it, you work out slow, one honest conversation at a time. That's all any of us can do. The party didn't end so much as it dissolved. By 4:30, people had started finding reasons to leave early. A headache, a dog that needed letting out, a long drive back to Marietta that hadn't seemed like a problem 2 hours earlier. Nobody wanted to say the real reason out loud, which was that watching a family come apart at the seams over cake and mimosas had used up whatever appetite anybody had left for celebration. Simone gathered the twins' diaper bag and looked over at Andre, who was already folding up the portable playpen they'd brought in case the babies got fussy. You ready? He asked. Almost. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Yvonne stood at the sink, not actually washing anything, just running water over an already clean serving spoon, the universal posture of a woman who needed her hands busy while her mind did something harder. Simone walked over, Nadia balanced on her hip. Ms. Yvonne? Yvonne turned off the water and turned around, and her eyes were wet in a way she was clearly trying to blink back before anyone noticed. Baby, I am so sorry. I had no idea this would turn into all this. I just wanted to see you. I've missed you something terrible. I know, Simone said gently. I've missed you too. You did nothing wrong today. You hear me? Nothing. Yvonne reached out and touched Nadia's small cheek with the back of one finger, the gesture soft and practiced. A grandmother's gesture, whether the paperwork agreed with it or not. You raised your voice to exactly nobody, and my son still managed to burn this whole house down around his own party. I didn't come here to burn anything down. I know that too. Yvonne's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. But sometimes the truth walks in, wearing a cream dress holding a baby, and it doesn't have to raise its voice to burn a man's whole story to the ground. It just has to show up. Simone didn't have a response for that, so she just squeezed the older woman's hand, and after a moment, Yvonne squeezed back. You'll bring them around? Yvonne asked. Even with everything. I don't want to lose you all because of my son's mess. We'll figure it out, Simone said, which was as much of a promise as she was willing to make on a day like today. Out in the driveway, loading car seats back into the Escalade, Simone caught sight of Marcus standing alone on the porch, arms crossed, watching them without pretending not to. Andre noticed too, and though his jaw tightened slightly, he said nothing, just kept buckling Xavier into his seat with the same steady patience he brought to everything. You want me to say something to him? Andre asked quietly, once the boys were secured. No, Simone said. I think he's got enough to sit with today. But Marcus crossed the yard anyway, hands shoved in his pockets, stopping a respectful distance from the open car door. Andre, right? He said, That's right. Andre's voice was even, not unfriendly, but not warm either. The voice of a man who had heard plenty about the person standing in front of him and had decided a long time ago not to let it turn him into something he wasn't. Good to finally meet you. Yeah. Marcus glanced at the babies, then at Simone, then back at some point on the pavement that seemed easier to look at than either of them. They're beautiful, all four of them. Thank you, Simone said simply. I'm not. He exhaled, hard, like the sentence was physically difficult to push out. I'm not trying to start anything. I just wanted to say that. And I wanted to say I'm sorry, for today. For a lot of things, honestly, but today especially. My mama shouldn't have put you in that position without warning you what you were walking into. She didn't put me in any position, Simone said. I chose to come, and I'm not sorry I did. Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing that. Can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer. Simone waited. Did you know, he said, quieter now, that it was never you? before today. Did you already know, all this time, and just never? I found out 8 months after our divorce, Simone said. I never told you because you never asked. You blocked me on everything the week the papers were signed, Marcus. You made it very clear you didn't want to know anything else about my life. I know. His voice cracked, just slightly on the second word. I know I did that. I'm not going to pretend I didn't think about telling you, Simone admitted, surprising herself a little with the honesty of it. There were nights, early on, when I wanted to call you just to say it, just to make you sit with it. I used to lay awake writing the whole speech out in my head, every word I was going to say, every look I was going to give you when I said it. I had that speech memorized for months, Marcus, word for word. What stopped you? Nothing stopped me. Exactly. I just got pregnant, and I had 4 babies to take care of. And honestly, Marcus, you stopped being something I had room to think about. That landed harder than anything else she'd said all day, and they both seemed to know it. That's fair, Marcus said quietly. Get tested, Simone added. Not unkindly, just plain, the way you'd tell somebody there was spinach in their teeth. Not for me, not to prove anything to anybody at that party today. Get tested for Deja, and for that baby she's carrying, because she deserves a partner who deals in facts instead of assumptions. I didn't deserve 4 years of being blamed for something that was never confirmed. She doesn't deserve to spend the rest of her life with a man who might do the exact same thing to her the second something goes wrong. Marcus didn't say anything for a long moment. Behind him, through the front window, they could both see Deja sitting alone on the couch now, most of the guests gone, staring at nothing in particular, one hand resting on her belly. Yeah, he finally said. Yeah, I hear you. Simone climbed into the passenger seat, and Andre closed her door gently, and as they pulled out of the driveway, she watched in the side mirror as Marcus stood there in the yard, alone, getting smaller, until the Escalade turned the corner and he disappeared from view entirely. She didn't feel triumphant. She'd expected, somewhere in the deep, private part of herself that had rehearsed this exact scenario in 100 angry showers over the years, that this moment would feel like winning. Instead, it just felt like weather passing through. A storm that had needed to happen, that had happened, and that she could now watch clear out of her rearview mirror while she drove home to feed her children dinner. Inside the house, once the last guest had finally gone, and Yvonne had retreated to the kitchen to start the long, quiet work of putting away trays of untouched food, Marcus sat down on the couch beside Deja. She didn't move away from him, which he took, cautiously, as a small mercy. I need you to be honest with me, Deja said, staring straight ahead at the wall, at a framed photo of Marcus as a boy sitting on Yvonne's lap. Not for me. For him. She touched her belly. Have you ever, one time, gotten yourself tested? No, Marcus said. Not once. In 4 years of trying with her, and 18 months with me. No. Deja nodded slowly, absorbing it, her jaw tight. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what you did to that woman? I'm starting to, Marcus said, and his voice was thinner than she'd ever heard it, all the swagger gone out of it entirely. I really am starting to, Deja. Sitting here right now, watching her walk out of here with those 4 babies. I've been telling myself a story for 2 years. I built my whole comeback on top of a story I never once bothered to check. You built our whole relationship on top of it, Deja corrected, sharp, though her eyes were wet again. You let me believe I was special because I could give you something she couldn't. And the whole time, it might have never had anything to do with either one of us. It might have been you, this entire time. I know. Do you? Because I need you to actually know it, Marcus. Not just say it to get me to stop being upset with you. She finally turned to look at him, and there was nothing soft in her face. Not right now. I am 8 months pregnant. I do not have the energy to be lied to. Not today. Not for the rest of this pregnancy. Not ever again. I'm going to get tested, Marcus said. Monday. First thing Monday morning, I'll call and make the appointment. Good. Deja looked back at the wall. And I want to be there when you get the results. Not because I don't trust you to tell me the truth. Because I don't trust you to tell yourself the truth if nobody else is in the room. Marcus absorbed that. The accuracy of it landing somewhere deep and uncomfortable, and said nothing. because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. The drive home for Simone's family was quiet at first, just the hum of the highway and the occasional coo from the back seat, where all 4 car seats sat in a neat row. Renee had gone ahead in her own car. It was just Simone and Andre now, the babies drifting toward their evening naps, the Atlanta skyline sliding past the windows in the softening afternoon light. "You okay?" Andre asked, reaching over to take her hand at a red light. "I'm good," Simone said, and this time there was no performance in it at all, just plain fact. "I really am good, Dre. I thought walking into that house was going to feel like something enormous, like I was gearing up for a fight I'd been carrying around in my chest for 2 years. And it just felt like a Tuesday," Simone said, and laughed a little, surprised at herself. "It felt like introducing my kids to people at a party. That's it. That's all it was. He did all the heavy lifting on his own end. All I had to do was show up as myself." Andre squeezed her hand. "That's the whole story right there, baby. That's been the whole story this entire time." In the back seat, Xavier let out a small, sleepy sound, and Nadia answered him with one of her own, the two of them babbling softly to each other in whatever private language 11-month-old twins developed between themselves, oblivious to everything that had happened that afternoon, oblivious to the 2 years of hurt and vindication that had led up to this exact drive home, caring only about the bottle waiting for them and the nap coming soon after. Simone glanced back at them in the rearview mirror and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't fully felt in longer than she could remember. Not vindication, not victory, just peace, plain and ordinary, the kind you don't notice arriving until you realize it's already there. By Sunday morning, the story had already made its way through 3 separate group chats, 2 church prayer lines, and 1 Facebook post from a second cousin who hadn't even attended the shower but had heard about it secondhand and felt compelled to comment anyway. By Monday, Marcus Rain sat in a sterile waiting room at a fertility clinic in Buckhead, filling out intake paperwork with hands that would not quite stop shaking. Deja seated beside him with her arms crossed over her belly, not speaking, just waiting. The way you wait for a verdict you already suspect but need to hear said out loud by somebody with a medical degree. It would be another 9 days before the results came back. 9 days that Marcus would later describe, to almost no one, as the longest of his entire life. Longer than the 4 years of failed pregnancy tests with Simone. Longer than the divorce. Longer than any stretch of waiting he'd ever endured. Because for the first time in his adult life, he was finally, actually, waiting to find out the truth about himself instead of deciding it about somebody else. During those 9 days, Marcus went to work, came home, sat through dinner with Deja in a silence that wasn't hostile so much as it was heavy, both of them circling the same unspoken question without quite landing on it out loud. He caught himself, more than once, replaying old conversations in his head, the barbershop mostly, Saturday mornings with a towel around his neck, and a chorus of amens and mm-hms every time he complained about his ex-wife's body failing him. He thought about how easy it had been to say it, how good it had felt, at the time, to have somewhere to put the shame instead of carrying it himself. He thought about the 2 miscarriages, too, in a way he hadn't let himself think about them in years. He remembered Simone doubled over on their bathroom floor the second time, remembered driving her to the hospital going 90 on the interstate, remembered sitting in a waiting room feeling something crack open in his chest that he didn't have language for, and remembered, with a shame that sat heavier every day of that 9-day wait, how quickly that grief had curdled into blame instead of staying grief. How much easier blame had been to carry than sorrow. He didn't say any of this to Deja during those 9 days. He wasn't ready yet, but he wrote it down, one night, in the Notes app on his phone, at 2 in the morning while she slept beside him. Not to show anyone, just to get it out of his own head and onto something outside of himself, the way you'd lance something that had been swelling too long under the skin. "I think I was scared the whole time," he wrote. "I think somewhere I already knew, and I built a whole story so I wouldn't have to feel it." He didn't delete the note. He let it sit there, unsent, undeleted, the closest thing to a confession he'd managed to write in his entire adult life. The results came back on a Wednesday. Marcus sat in Dr. Okafor's office with Deja beside him, her hand resting on top of his on the armrest between their two chairs, and watched the doctor pull up a chart on the monitor with the kind of unhurried calm that medical professionals seem to train specifically for moments like this. "Mr. Rain," Dr. Okafor said, "your results show a significantly reduced sperm count, along with some motility issues. It's a condition that's fairly treatable in a lot of cases. Not a closed door by any means, but it would absolutely have made natural conception difficult over an extended period. Combined with your partner's history, if she'd had similar difficulty conceiving with you specifically, this would likely have been a significant contributing factor." The room went very quiet. "So it was me," Marcus said, "and it wasn't a question. Not really. More like a man saying a sentence out loud to see if it felt real once it left his mouth. This whole time, it was me." "It's rarely just one person," Dr. Okafor said carefully. Professionally, the practiced neutrality of someone who had delivered this particular sentence to many rooms full of complicated silence before this one. Fertility issues are often a combination of factors on both sides, but in your case specifically, yes, this would have made conception with a partner significantly more difficult, independent of any factors on her end. Deja's hand tightened on top of his. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't say anything at all, actually, just sat there holding his hand, while 4 years of a lie he'd built his entire self-image around finally, formally, collapsed in a doctor's office with fluorescent lighting and a poster about prenatal vitamins on the wall. Marcus put his free hand over his face and sat like that for a long moment, and Deja, to her credit, let him. "I need you to hear something," Deja said finally, once they were back in the car, the diagnosis paperwork folded in her purse like evidence. "I am not leaving you. I want to say that first because I can see you spiraling, and I need that off the table before we talk about anything else." Marcus looked at her, something raw and grateful crossing his face. "But," Deja continued, and her voice hardened slightly, "I need you to understand what you did. Not the infertility. That's not a moral failing, Marcus. That's biology. That could have happened to anybody. What you did wrong was decide, without evidence, that it was her fault, and then punish her for 4 years for something you never even bothered to check. And then you carried that same certainty into our relationship and let it become the whole foundation of how you saw yourself as a man. That's the part I need you to sit with. Not the diagnosis. The lie you told yourself, and everybody else, to avoid ever having to face it." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "Do you?" Deja pressed. "Because I need you to actually do something with knowing it. I need you to call her." Marcus's head snapped toward her. "Call Simone? Not to grovel, not to make some big dramatic apology tour for social media points. Just call her privately and say the words out loud to her that you just heard in that office. She spent 4 years being called something ugly for a condition that was never hers. She deserves to hear, directly from you, that you finally know the truth. Not because it fixes anything, because it's the decent thing to do, and you owe her at least one decent thing after everything." Marcus was quiet for a long stretch of the drive, watching the city slide by, turning the idea over. "Okay," he finally said, "I'll call her." He didn't call that day. He didn't call the next day either. It took him 4 more days to work up the nerve, sitting in his truck outside his apartment complex on a Sunday evening, phone in his hand, Simone's number still saved from years ago, under a contact name he hadn't bothered to change. Just Simone. No heart emoji anymore. That had been deleted a long time ago. She picked up on the 4th ring. Marcus? Not a question. Just his name. Flat, cautious. The voice of a woman bracing for whatever came next. "Hey, I know this is out of nowhere. I got my test results back." Silence on the other end, but not a hostile silence. A waiting one. "It was me," Marcus said, and the words came easier this time, the second time saying them out loud. "Reduced count, motility issues, the whole thing. Doctor said it would have made natural conception difficult on its own, no matter what was going on with you." He exhaled, long and shaky. "I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Not through your cousin, not through my mama, not through whatever's left of that group chat that's probably still talking about the shower. From me." Simone was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, careful, not cold but not warm either. The voice of someone measuring out exactly how much of herself she was willing to spend on this conversation. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "I mean that. It took something to make this call." "I owe you a real apology," Marcus said. "Not the kind I gave you in my mama's front yard. A real one. For 4 years of blaming you for something I never even checked, for the word I used." His voice caught on that part. "I called you Barren, Simone. To my friends. To your face. I don't think I ever really understood what that word was doing to you until I watched you walk into that party with 4 healthy babies and realized every single thing I'd said about you for 2 years was a lie I built to protect my own ego." "It hurt," Simone said simply. "No theatrics in it, just fact." "It hurt worse than almost anything else in that marriage, actually. Worse than losing those 2 pregnancies. Because at least grief doesn't have a villain in it. What you did gave my grief a villain, and the villain was me." "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and his voice cracked fully this time. "I am so sorry, Simone. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I'm asking you to. I just needed you to hear it said plainly, one time, before I try to move forward with anything else in my life." Simone let the silence sit for a moment before she answered. "I forgave you a while ago, actually," she said. "Not because you deserved it right away, because carrying that anger around for 2 years was heavier than I wanted my life to be, especially once I had 4 babies who needed all of my energy going somewhere better than hating their father's ex-wife role model." A small, dry laugh. "I forgave you for me, Marcus, not for you. That's fair. But I want you to do something with this," Simone continued, her voice firming up. "Don't just carry the guilt around and let it rot in you quietly. Be honest with Deja every single day of that pregnancy and beyond. Don't let fear turn you cruel again the next time something hard happens in your life. That's the real apology, not the phone call, what you do with what you know now." "I'm trying," Marcus said. "I really am trying." "I believe you're trying," Simone said. "I hope you keep trying after the shock wears off too. That's usually where people like you fall apart. Not in the moment of the crisis, but 3 months later, when it's easier to go back to old habits." Marcus absorbed that, the accuracy of it stinging in a way that felt necessary. "Can I ask you something else?" "You can ask. Would it be okay, someday, not now, not soon, if the kids knew each other? Deja's baby and yours? I know that's a lot to ask, given everything." Simone considered it for a long moment. "Someday, maybe. Not because you and I need to be close, Marcus. Because kids shouldn't inherit grudges that were never theirs to carry. But that's a someday conversation, not a today one." "Okay," Marcus said. "Someday's enough. Thank you, Simone. For all of it. For today, and for 6 years ago, and for everything in between that I probably don't even deserve to be thanked for." "Take care of yourself, Marcus," Simone said, and it was the exact sentence she'd written on that note 2 years ago, mailed back with a box of his mother's dishes. And this time, it sounded like something closer to an ending they both actually believed in. She hung up first. Deja's baby, a girl they named Harmony, arrived 6 weeks later, 3 days past her due date, after 11 hours of labor, during which Marcus did not leave her side once, did not check his phone once, did not do anything except hold her hand and repeat. Over and over, everything he'd learned in the 9 days between the doctor's appointment and this delivery room, that he loved her, that he was sorry, that whatever came next in their life together, he was done building it on top of assumptions he'd never bothered to check. When Harmony finally arrived, 7 pounds 2 ounces, screaming with the particular fury of a baby who'd taken her sweet time getting into the world, Marcus held her against his chest and cried in a way he hadn't allowed himself to cry in years. Not performative, not for an audience, just quiet and real, the tears of a man finally arriving somewhere honest after a long detour through his own pride. "She's perfect," he whispered to Deja, who lay exhausted and glowing against the hospital pillows. "She is," Deja agreed, reaching out to touch her daughter's small hand. "And Marcus, she's going to grow up knowing the truth about everything, about her father's mistakes, and about how he tried to fix them. Not to shame you. So she learns early that owning your failures is possible, and survivable, and sometimes even necessary." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat, and looked down at his daughter's face and thought, for the first time in longer than he could remember, that maybe he actually had something worth being proud of, that he hadn't built on top of somebody else's pain. A year passed the way years do, when you're chasing after 4 toddlers who have all recently discovered the joy of running in different directions at once. Simone's boutique event business had expanded into a second location, mostly because a viral post about the quadruplet mom who plans the best baby showers in Atlanta had brought in more clients than she could handle out of one storefront. An irony that never failed to make her laugh when she thought about it too hard. Andre had built a small addition onto their house, a playroom with 4 little cubbies, one for each kid, their names painted above them in Simone's own careful handwriting. Nadia, Noel, Xavier, Malik. On weekends, the whole family piled into the Escalade and drove out to Stone Mountain to visit Yvonne, who had, in the year since the shower, become something between a grandmother and a co-conspirator, keeping a drawer of snacks and toys at her house specifically for the 4 small people who now called her Grandma Yvonne, without anyone having formally decided that was allowed. Marcus and Deja had moved into a bigger apartment in East Atlanta, closer to his job, with a nursery that had slowly transformed into a toddler's room, purple walls, a rocking chair in the corner that Yvonne had reupholstered herself as a gift. The kids hadn't met yet, not really, not beyond a handful of accidental crossings at Yvonne's house on holidays when the timing overlapped, brief and cautious and always supervised, everybody still feeling out the edges of what this new, complicated family shape was supposed to look like. That changed on a Saturday in late spring, at Yvonne's 60th birthday party, when the whole tangled web of people connected to her, by blood, by marriage, by divorce, by the strange gravity of shared history, ended up in the same backyard at the same time, for the first occasion since the baby shower a year earlier. Simone arrived first, the 4 kids tumbling out of the car in matching outfits Yvonne had specifically requested, straight into their grandmother's open arms, screeching with the particular joy toddlers reserve for people who keep candy in unmarked drawers just for them. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, Deja beside him with Harmony balanced on her hip, 7 months old now and fat-cheeked and curious about everything, reaching for anything within grabbing distance. For a moment, both families stood at opposite ends of the yard, the old awkwardness threatening to resettle over everything the way it had a year ago. Then Nadia, fearless in the way only a 2-year-old can be fearless, spotted Harmony from across the lawn and beelined straight toward her, plopping down in the grass in front of Deja without a shred of hesitation. "Baby," Nadia announced, pointing at Harmony with the flat authority of a toddler stating an obvious fact. Deja crouched down, laughing despite herself, surprised into it. "That's right, this is Harmony." "Harmonie," Nadia repeated carefully, testing the syllables, and then reached out one small hand to pat Harmony's foot, which made Harmony giggle, which made Nadia giggle, and within 30 seconds, the 2 other twins had wandered over too. Curious about whatever had captured their sister's attention, and just like that, 4 toddlers and a baby were tangled together in the grass, in a scene that neither Marcus nor Simone had planned, orchestrated, or even particularly expected. It had simply happened, the way children make things happen, without any regard for the complicated adult history hovering above their heads. Simone and Marcus found themselves standing a few feet apart, both watching, neither quite sure what to say. "They're getting along," Marcus offered, a little awkwardly. "Kids usually do, if you let them," Simone said. "It's the adults who make things complicated." "Yeah." Marcus watched Xavier attempt, unsuccessfully, to share his cup of juice with Harmony, most of it ending up on the grass instead. "I never thought I'd see this. Honestly, a year ago I thought I'd ruined everything so bad that this," he gestured vaguely at the scene in front of them, "wasn't ever going to be possible." "People surprise you," Simone said. "Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. Depends on what they do with the surprise." Marcus glanced at her, and something in his expression settled, like a question he'd been carrying for a long time had finally found its answer. "Deja's been on me about therapy," he admitted. "Individual stuff, not just couples, working through why I needed so bad, for so long, to have somebody else to blame when things went wrong in my life." "That's good," Simone said, and meant it, no edge left in her voice at all. That's real work. I'm glad you're doing it. You look happy, Marcus said. Genuinely happy. Not performing it. I remember what performing happy looked like on you, back when things were bad between us. This isn't that. I am happy, Simone said simply. It took a lot to get here. But yeah, I am. They stood together a moment longer, watching their children tangle together in the grass. 5 small people, who would grow up knowing each other not because their parents had orchestrated some careful, dramatic reconciliation, but because life had simply, quietly, made room for it, once the adults finally stopped needing the drama to prove anything. Yvonne appeared beside them with a plate of cake in each hand, offering one to each of her children, the son she'd raised and the daughter-in-law she'd never officially lost, and looked out at the pile of babies and toddlers in the grass, with the satisfied expression of a woman who had spent an entire year quietly praying for exactly this outcome. Look at that, Yvonne said softly. Look at what grew back, after everything. Simone took the cake, watching Nadia attempt to feed Harmony a fistful of grass, before Deja gently intercepted, and felt something in her chest that she hadn't expected to feel again in relation to this particular family. Not forgiveness exactly, that had already happened, quietly, on a phone call a year ago. Something closer to peace, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, the kind that just settles in, ordinary and permanent, like weather that finally clears for good. Later that evening, after the party wound down and the last of the cake had been wrapped in foil and pressed into everyone's hands to take home, Simone buckled her 4 kids into their car seats while Andre loaded the diaper bags into the trunk. Across the yard, she could see Marcus doing the same with Harmony, Deja beside him laughing at something he'd said, the two of them moving together with an ease that hadn't existed a year ago, forged, in part, out of the wreckage of a party that had been designed to humiliate somebody and had ended up healing something instead. "You good?" Andre asked, sliding into the driver's seat beside her. "I'm good," Simone said, and this time, like the last time, there was no performance in it at all. As they pulled out of Yvonne's driveway, Malik reached out from his car seat and grabbed for Nadia's hand across the gap between them, the way he did most car rides, the two of them settling into the particular quiet comfort of siblings who'd shared a womb and now shared everything else. A family built not on anyone's revenge, and not really on anyone's redemption either, but on the simple, stubborn fact of showing up honestly, again and again, until the truth finally had nowhere left to hide. Simone looked back at her 4 children in the rearview mirror, watched the sunset gold over the Atlanta skyline through the back window, and thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, sitting alone in a parking garage after a doctor's appointment, crying over a diagnosis that had never actually existed. She hadn't known, back then, that the truth would eventually walk itself into a living room in Stone Mountain and introduce itself with 4 small voices saying hello. She hadn't known, back then, that the truth would eventually walk itself into a living room in Stone Mountain and introduce itself with 4 small voices saying hello. She hadn't known, back then, that the truth would eventually walk itself into a living room in Stone Mountain and introduce itself with 4 small voices saying hello. For exactly who she'd always been. "Mama," Nadia said from the back seat, apropos of nothing, the way toddlers announce things. "Yes, baby?" "Cake," Nadia said solemnly, holding up a crumb she'd apparently smuggled out of the party in her fist. Simone laughed, a real laugh, loud and unguarded, echoing through the car all the way home. 6 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon that had nothing special about it at all, Simone sat in her studio going over floor plans for a fall wedding when her phone buzzed with a text from a number she still hadn't bothered to rename in her contacts. "Marcus, Harmony said her first word today. Wanted you to know it was Nana, for my mama. Figured you'd get a kick out of that since your 4 probably said it to her first." Lol. Simone smiled at her phone, alone in her studio, surrounded by fabric swatches and seating charts for people whose lives had nothing to do with her own complicated history. "Simone, that's sweet. Tell Ms. Yvonne I said congratulations on the new title." "Marcus, will do. Also, therapy's going good. 6 months in. Wanted you to know that too, since you're partly the reason I finally went." Simone considered that for a moment before responding. thumb hovering over the screen. Simone, I'm glad, Marcus. Genuinely. Keep going. Marcus, I will. She set the phone down and went back to her floor plans, and didn't think about the exchange again until that evening, buckling 4 squirming toddlers into their bath, Xavier attempting an ambitious escape over the side of the tub that Andre caught just in time, Nadia narrating the entire bath routine to nobody in particular in the specific stream of consciousness way 2-year-olds narrate everything. It occurred to Simone, watching her husband wrangle their laughing, splashing children into pajamas, that she had built exactly the life she'd once been told she wasn't capable of building. Not out of spite, not as a rebuttal to anyone, just because she had kept showing up for herself, honestly, one ordinary Tuesday at a time, long after the people who doubted her had stopped being anywhere close enough to see it happen. That, she thought, closing the bathroom door softly behind her while Andre started the bedtime story routine, was the only kind of comeback that had ever actually mattered. Not the dress. Not the 4 car seats lined up like dominoes at a baby shower. Not even the silence that had fallen over that living room the day the truth finally introduced itself. Just this. An ordinary evening, 4 healthy children, a husband who'd never once made her feel like anything less than exactly enough, and a peace that had taken 2 years and a great deal of grief to arrive at, but had, finally, arrived, and showed no signs this time of ever leaving again. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us putting it together, do us a favor and hit subscribe on Turn Up Tales. We've got a whole library of stories just like this one. Real, messy, honest family drama, with the kind of endings that actually feel earned. Drop a comment and tell us what you would have done in Simone's shoes, and we'll see you in the next one.